177 years later on December 26, 1980, after midnight, Staff Sergeant James Peniston at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in England would also encounter a strange craft with symbols in Rendlesham Forest. When Sergeant Peniston dragged his fingers over the symbols, his mind was filled with zeros and ones of binary code and telepathic impressions of a time machine from a distant future where an advanced civilization was dying out. Its mission was to harvest genetic material from Earth to use as band-aids to extend the future civilization's survival. There was no pilot. The triangular craft operated with alien self-activating software. Now here is a comparison. Rendlesham Forest, triangle, vertex, circle, this circle. Here is 1803, triangle, circle here, two circles here. These red circles I put on there so you'd see this is where they are in the writing that was written down and has been part of Japanese UFO lore since 1803. So that means that spanning a lot of decades, that we're beginning to sometimes see patterns that resemble. And a year later, on August 28, 1991, 11 years after Sergeant Peniston touched the symbols on the alien craft in the Rendlesham Forest, Soviet authorities were tracking a UFO on a zigzag course at 4,225 miles an hour. The rapid radar track vanished over Kyrgyzstan. A year later, in June 1992, a search party found a cylinder-shaped craft with strange green symbols on it. The investigators reported, quote, powerful electromagnetic field emanating from the wreckage, close quote. All photographs and videotape recordings were overexposed. The craft had crashed in the Shaitan Mazar Gorge, also known as the Devil's Grave, in the central Tian Shan Mountains of eastern Kyrgyzstan. And then, 14 years after that, in late June 2015, an Army sergeant with his wife, two young children, dog and a cat, began moving from, I want to make sure I say it, Richmond Hill, Georgia, very near Savannah, on their way to go to Fort Carson in Colorado, and this was going to be generally their route right here. He's a very intelligent, very responsible Army sergeant, I know what his general work is, and he's very familiar and works with them all the time. This is very important. The GPS is part of his daily life. And he sets the family truck's GPS for the route, and they plan to travel at night when it was cooler with less traffic and stay in motels during the day. The husband, who I'm calling Sergeant CJ with his permission, because he's active Army, he wants to understand what is happening to him. The man is really living a schizophrenic life of strict Army and having what we're now going to unfold. So I am honoring everything about him, but I've seen his DD-214, I have seen a lot of documents on this man, and I've talked with his wife. Well, they start off, this is where they want to go. And between here and there, something weird, really weird happens. He and his wife are both shocked when this comes down out of the sky in front of their truck. And he estimated that he is looking at something that is 820 feet long, that's nearly 3 football fields, and nearly 200 feet high vertically. It has, he said there were bright white sparks that were projected out beyond the craft, front and back. He couldn't understand. He said, when I sketched it, it's wrong. He said, I sketched it like it's coming. He said that the sparks were not connected to this strange, gigantic disc. And he did not, he couldn't understand what he was looking at. And then he and his wife both noticed that there are these 5 symbols right here below the midline. He told me, he said, in the Army, I'm a trained observer. I've been a trained observer for 15 years. I'm able to identify high-velocity rounds as well as mortars, rockets, artillery, aircraft, all types of aircraft. I'm trained to do that for whatever comes down in front of us on military missions. This huge craft was way beyond anything I'd ever been trained for. Sergeant CJ's wife remembered the UFO surface glistened, and she was comparing it for me. She said, you know, when you get a rainbow sheen, like on an oil slick, she said the whole surface to her looked like these rainbow colors, sort of dim and surface reflections when it tilted and moved toward them. And she also thought that there were round lights around the perimeter. The encounter was from 1:25 to 1:29 a.m. Eastern, precisely from Sergeant CJ's point of view, on the early morning of June 29th, 2015, because he looked at his digital watch. He said, I'm so used to looking at my watch all the time in my work. He said, I looked at my digital watch when we saw the craft, and then he said it had been there for a few minutes, and then he said it didn't move. I swear it did not move. It blinked out in front of them like they shut off a light. And for those of you who are very familiar with the field, you know that is a very common description